for problems. I wage my war on the world inside. I take my gun to the enemy's side. Oh, I've been asking for problems. So look me in the eyes, tell me what you see. Perfect paradise, tearing up the seams. I wish I could escape it. I don't wanna fake it. I wish I could erase it, make you hard believe, but I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know I'm a bad liar, bad liar. And now you know you're free to go. I can't breathe, I can't be what you want me to be. Believe me this one time. Believe me, I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know you're free to go. I'm a bad liar, bad liar. And now you know you're free to go, free to go. I'm a bad liar. Oh, hush, my dear, it's been a difficult years, and terrorists don't prey on innocent victims. Trust me, darling, trust me, darling. It's been a loveless year, a man of three fears: integrity, faith, and crocodile tears. Trust me, darling, trust me, darling. Yeah. So look me in the eyes, tell me what you see. Perfect paradise, tearing at the seams. I wish I could escape it. I don't wanna fake it. I wish I could erase it, make you hard believe, but I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know you're free to go. Did all my dreams never meant one thing? This happiness lie in a diamond ring. Oh, I've been asking for problems. I wage my war on the world inside. I take my gun to the enemy's side. Oh, I've been asking for problems. So look me in the eyes, tell me what you see. Perfect paradise, tearing up the seams. I wish I could escape it. I don't wanna fake it. I wish I could erase it, make you hard believe, but I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now
150.
Oh, hush, my dear, it's been a difficult years, and the terrorists don't prey on innocent victims. Trust me, darling, trust me, darling. It's been a loveless year. I'm a man of three fears: integrity, faith, and crocodile tears. Trust me, darling, trust me, darling. Yeah, on the world inside. I take my gun to the enemy's side. Oh, I've been asking for problems, problems. So look me in the eyes, tell me what you see. Perfect paradise, tearing up the seams. I wish I could escape it. I don't wanna fake it. I wish I could erase it. Make you hard believe, but I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know I'm a bad liar, bad liar. And now you know you're free to go. I can't breathe, I can't be what you want me to be. Believe me, this one time. Believe me, I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know you're free to go. I'm a bad liar, bad liar. And now you know you're free to go, free to go. I'm a bad liar. Oh, hush, my dear, it's been a difficult years, and the terrorists don't prey on innocent victim. Trust me, darling, trust me, darling. It's been a loveless year, a man of three fears: integrity, faith, and crocodile tears. Trust me, darling, trust me, darling. Yeah. So look me in the eyes, tell me what you see. Perfect paradise, tearing at the seams. I wish I could escape it. I don't wanna fake it. I wish I could erase it. Make you hard believe, but I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you know you're free to go. Did all my dreams ever mean one thing? Does happiness lie in a diamond ring? Oh, I've been asking for problems, problems. I wage my war on the world inside. I take my gun to the enemy's side. Oh, I've been asking for problems, problems. So look me in the eyes, tell me what you see. Perfect paradise, tearing up the seams. I wish I could escape it. I don't wanna fake it. I wish I could erase it. Make you hard believe, but I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now you
Fakultas Ekonomi harus menjadi anggota asosiasi internasional. Secara umum, tujuan yang ingin dicapai Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis ULM yaitu menyelenggarakan pendidikan yang tinggi, yang berkualitas, dengan indikator keberhasilan mencapai akreditasi unggul untuk semua program studi dalam lingkup FEB ULM. Program studi akuntansi, program studi perpajakan, program sarjana atau S1, program studi akuntansi, program studi ilmu ekonomi dan studi pembangunan, ekonomi, program magister manajemen, program doktor ilmu ekonomi, transparansi pada tata pamong di FEB dapat terlaksana dari informasi yang dapat diakses oleh stakeholder ULM secara mudah dan akurat. Dari tahun 2015 sampai tahun 2018, Universitas Lambung Mangkurat meraih penghargaan anugerah keterbukaan Informasi Badan Publik dari Presiden Republik Indonesia. Berisi siswa, bimbingan akademik, kartu ujian, dan hasil studi, serta pengisian kuesioner kepuasan layanan di ULM yang wajib diisi oleh setiap mahasiswa setiap semesternya. Bagi mahasiswa yang mau lulus, mereka juga dapat mengakses sistem informasi wisuda untuk calon mahasiswa berupa sistem informasi penerimaan mahasiswa baru, baik melalui jalur tinggi negeri atau SNMPTN. Jalur seleksi bersama masuk perguruan tinggi negeri SNMPTN ataupun melalui jalur lewat laman sistem informasi admisi, baik untuk tingkat diploma, sarjana maupun pasca. Dan bisnis yang semula bernama Fakultas Ekonomi merupakan salah satu dari 4 fakultas tertua semenjak Universitas Lambung Mangkurat didirikan pada tahun 1958. Sampai pada tahun 2004, Fakultas Ekonomi merubah namanya menjadi Fakultas
tes
Ekonomi dan Bisnis dalam rangka program studi di fakultas. Maka Fakultas Ekonomi harus menjadi
mengganggu mana
bisnis atau IESP. Perubahan nama fakultas hal penting secara jangka panjang.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for registering to our webinar today. Our event will start at 2 p.m. sharp, and to all dear participants, please kindly turn off your microphone and camera to avoid distractions during the event. We will inform you later to when the event is starting. Please kindly turn on your microphone and camera. Thank you.
Selamat siang, Jackson dari kediaman Bapak Suhasil Nazara.
Ya, terdengar dari Kemenkyu kita bisa mendengar.
Oh ya, terima kasih Bapak.
Sama-sama.
Dalam di tangan mobil sapi namanya yo kesana terbangin jalan-jalan mobil sampai ke pinggir jalan gimana kita kasih tahu.
Kenapa ini orang malahan yang dianu? Malah orang yang anu. Ini malah orang itu siapa ini?
Ini sudah tahu. Ini yang anu kah narasumbernya kan?
Tahu.
Nama orang. Iya seminat orang ada orang lain tuh hadir.
Ini
Good afternoon and welcome to Rector of Lambung Mangkurat University, the Vice Minister of Finance, and all of dearest participants. The event will start in a few minutes. Please kindly turn off your microphone and camera to avoid distractions during event. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the international webinar presented by Department of Economic and Development Studies, Faculty of Economic and Business, Lambung Mangkurat University. In this international webinar, we will discuss on how can Indonesia survive from economic turbulences during COVID-19 pandemic. To all dearest participants, please turn off the microphone and camera to avoid distractions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to me to inform you that among us here we have Profesor Dr. Haji Sutarto Hadi, MSI, MSc, as Rector of Lambung Mangkurat University, Profesor Suhasil Nazara, PhD, the Vice Minister of Finance, Jayan Menon, PhD, Visiting Senior Fellow ASEAN Singapore, former Senior Economist of ASEAN Development Bank, Profesor Muhammad Handri Imansyah, PhD, Faculty of Economics and Business, former consultant of ASEAN Development Bank, and former regional economist of Ministry of Finance. Dr. Haji Atmahayat, MSI, AKCA, the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, Lambung Mangkurat University. And Muhammad Hudaya, PhD, as our moderator for today. As the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, Lambung Mangkurat University, Mr. Atmahayat will be delivering the welcoming speech. Mr. Atmahayat, you have 7 minutes to deliver the welcoming speech. Please, to Mr. Atmahayat. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Greeting to all of us. His Excellency Rector of Lambung Mangkurat University, Profesor Dr. Haji Sutarto Hadi, MSc, MSc, the respectable Vice Deans and Faculty of Economic and Business, Lambung Mangkurat University, Head and Secretaries of Study Program, the Honorable Public Universities and Private Colleges, the official and staff of regional government agencies, the head and staff of public and private companies, lecturers and students, and all invited or participants of international webinar who attended from various regions. I'm sorry I cannot mention one by one. In particular, I would like to extend my respect and appreciation to our speaker today. Keynote speaker, Professor Suhasil Nazara, PhD, Vice Minister of Finance, Ministry of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. The first invited speaker, Jayan Menon, PhD, Senior Fellow, ICS, Singapore, former Senior Economist of Asian Development Bank. The second invited speaker is very well known to us and he initiated this event from Professor M. Handri Imansyah, PhD, Faculty of Economic and Business, Lambung Mangkurat University, former consultant of ADB, and former regional economist of Ministry of Finance. Furthermore, I would also like to express my respect and thank you to the moderator who will guide this event, Muhammad Hudaya, PhD, one of the young lecturer of the Accounting Department, Faculty of Economic and Business, Lambung Mangkurat University. First, let us praise and say our gratitude to the Lord Almighty because of the blessing of His mercy and grace. We can gather together here in good health virtually in order to attend a scientific gathering, namely international webinar, even with the theme, how can Indonesia survive from economic turbulences during COVID-19 pandemic? This event is organized by Economic and Development Studies Department, Faculty of Economic and Business, Lambung Mangkurat University. Furthermore, on behalf of the head of faculty, I would like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to the head of Economic and Development Studies Department and the executive committee who have prepared this event so that it is well organized. As we all know together, COVID-19 pandemic has hit almost all countries in the world. And this pandemic has not only caused a health crisis, but also has become crisis of economic in finance globally. Macroeconomics indicators in all countries in the world experience a contraction, where the rate of economic growth drops and the average grow minus. How about economy in Indonesia? There are at least it major impact from COVID-19 for Indonesia economy, term of labor and industrial performance. This impact have devastated social and economic joint. The government through Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia has noted the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the Indonesia economy in its major impact, namely, one, the widespread of termination of employment relationship or PHK. Two, the contraction of purchasing managers index or PMI. Three, the imports performance. Four, the impact of inflation. And five, the cancellation of domestic and international flight. And six, the declining number of foreign tourists. Seven, the loss of revenue from the air service sector. And eight, the decreasing of hotel occupancy. How will Indonesia economy rise again after experiencing the turbulence? Today, we will listen to the presentation and analysis from the three experts, and then we will discuss it together. Hopefully, this scientific gathering media is useful for contributing the ideas for the recovery of Indonesia economy ahead and providing added value to increasing our insight. Furthermore, I would like to ask respectfully to the Rector of Lambung Mangkurat University to give an opening speech and at the same time open this webinar event. Thank you to all parties, and I apologize if there are any shortcomings in hosting this webinar. I do apologize that in few moments I have to leave this scientific gathering room because there are other activities. Thank you and have a great webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, sir. It was a very delightful welcoming speech. Now this is the time for us to listen to the welcoming speech and opening of the webinar from Mr. Sutarto Hadi as Director of Lambung Mangkurat University. Mr. Sutarto Hadi, you have 7 minutes to deliver the welcome speech and to open the webinar. Please, to Mr. Sutarto Hadi, the time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
His Excellency Professor Swasil Najara PhD, Vice Minister of Finance, Ministry of Finance, the Republic of Indonesia. As a keynote speaker, the Honorable Mr. Jayan Menon PhD, Senior Fellow, Asia Singapore, former Senior Economist of Asian Development Bank, the Honorable Professor Henry Mansa PhD, Faculty of Economic and Business, also former consultant, Asian Development Bank, and former regional economist of the Ministry of Finance. The Honorable Dean Faculty of Economic and Business, Dr. Atma Hayat, just a few moments ago give a speech in this international webinar. First of all, I would like to extend my appreciation to the organizing committee for conducting this international webinar, especially because the organizing committee able to bring here Vice Minister of Finance, Professor Swahasil Nazara, PhD. So thank you so much to Professor Swahasil Nazara for your willingness to give a keynote speech in this international webinar. And we are in ULM and also all the participants, of course, very happy to your participation in this international webinar. As mentioned by Dean of the Faculty of Economic and Business, just now, the COVID-19 pandemic is far more than a health crisis. It is affecting societies and economies at their core. And of course, it will most likely increase poverty and inequality at the national and global scale. So if we listening to the speech from Dean, it is still long way to go, to the recovery, economic recovery, because he mentioned it's a factor, that impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. I think before we have in our hand the vaccine, it is very difficult for us to come to the economic recovery. And also, I understand that Indonesian economic is not doing really well currently in the last 4 months, especially export performance is not too good, and also rupiah current exchange is vulnerable. I do have experience with this currency because my two sons currently studies in UK, United Kingdom. So I observe every day the current exchange rate of rupiah to the British pound sterling. And for me, as a father of two sons, sending my sons to study abroad is very difficult currently because of this current exchange rates. And also in our country, in Indonesia, income and spending power have been decreased during the pandemic. So in my point of view, government need to prioritize social safety net program. So this is the issue currently we're facing in our country in Indonesia. And today we have international webinar with the theme, how can Indonesia survive from economic turbulences during COVID-19 pandemic? I think this is very good theme, then we can learn from the expert to this issue. So once again, thank you very much for the Faculty of Economic and Business, and especially to the organizing committee for conducting this international webinar. By reciting Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I officially this international webinar open. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sutarto Hadi. It was a very wonderful welcoming speech and opening of the webinar. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before starting the discussion, I would love to introduce our moderator for today. His name is Mr. Muhammad Huda, lecturer at Department of Accounting, Faculty of Economic and Business, Lambung Mangkurat University. His education is PhD in Accounting 2014, University of Wollongong, New South Wales, Australia. Master of Management 2006, University of Lambung Mangkurat, and Bachelor in Accounting 1999, University of Lambung Mangkurat. His work experience is consultant of the World Bank for Study on Regional Structural Reforms 1999, Regional Researcher of Semeru, Jakarta for Study on Local Autonomy 2000, Researcher at the Faculty of Commerce, University of Wollongong, Australia 2012. Awards: MCIT Grant for Doctoral Degree Scholarship 2008, A travel grant for young scholar workshop arranged by Australian National University 2008. Best presenter on ICMRES conference Melbourne, Australia 2018. And best qualitative paper on first NCAF conference Yogyakarta, co-authors with Melanie Yuliastina and Wahyudin Nur, Yogyakarta 2018. His community engagement experience is a chairman of Islamic Economic Society South Kalimantan Province and a vice chairman of Majelis Ekonomi Muhammadiyah South Kalimantan Province. All right, to Mr. Muhammad Hudaya, please, the time is yours.
Thank you, Erwina. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our respected guest, His Excellency Professor Suhasil Nazara, PhD, His Excellency Professor Dr. Sutarto Hadi, MSc, MSc, as a Rector of University of Lambang Mangkurat. Today, Department of Economics and Development Studies, Faculty of Economic and Business, University of Lambang Mangkurat, present an international webinar. The theme of today's webinar is How can Indonesia survive from economic turbulences during the COVID-19 pandemic? As we all know, the issue of the COVID-19 pandemic is happening and affecting all countries around the globe, including Indonesia. Today, we have one keynote speaker and two international speakers. Our keynote speaker is His Excellency Professor Suhasil Nazara, PhD, Vice Minister of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. And the two international speakers, the first one is Jayan Menon, PhD, visiting senior fellow at the Institute of the Southeast Asian Studies, Yusof Ishak Institute, Singapore, former senior economist of Asian Development Bank. And the second one is Professor Muhammad Handri Mansa from Faculty of Economic and Business, former consultant of Asian Development Bank, and former of Regional Economist of Ministry of Finance. To discuss how economic as a kind of policy and as discipline of knowledge can contribute to address this pressing issue. We divide this webinar into two rounds. The first round is the keynote speaker, His Excellency Professor Suhasil Nazara will deliver his presentation. Then we move on the second round, where our distinguished speaker will present their thoughts and ideas, as well as answering questions from the audience. Okay, before His Excellency Professor Suhasil Nazara deliver his presentation, I will introduce his brief profile. He was born in Jakarta on November 23, 1970. He obtained his bachelor degree majoring in economics from University of Indonesia in 1994, and his Master of Science from Cornell University, USA in 1997. And in 2003, he gained his Doctor of Philosophy from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, USA. He was a member of Fiscal Decentralization Expert Team for Ministry of Finance from 2009 to 2011. During 2009 and 2013, he was the chairman of Economic Department of Faculty of Economic Universitas Indonesia. Besides, he has served as the vice chairman of Regional Autonomy Supervisory Committee since 2009, Policy Group Coordinator of Secretariat of Poverty Reduction Acceleration National Team, Vice President Office since 2010, and the board of member of National Economic Committee, or CAN, in 2013 to 2014. Commencing on February 6, 2015, he served as the acting head of Fiscal Policy Agency, and October 31st, 2016, was inducted as the head of Fiscal Policy Agency. Now we invite His Excellency Professor Suhasil Nazara to present his presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Pak Rektor and also colleagues from the University of Lambung Mangkurat and also all of the seminar participants. It is very, very good. I'm very happy that we are able to meet virtually in this occasion of the international webinar by the Lambung Mangkurat University. I would like to convey my appreciation to the Lambung Mangkurat University for holding this session and at the same time providing the venue for the very interesting discussion, academic discussions on how the Indonesia experience handling this COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start my presentation by reminding all of us about the course of this COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic is started in 2019. In December, we start to hear about this virus, not in Indonesia, but starting from China. And then after that, actually, we did not expect it will go very wide. It's not going worldwide. We heard that it is quite severe in China, but then maybe in end of December, early January, we think that it's going to be like the SARS flu, which hit the world several years ago. We did not expect it will be very, very tough like this. But it turns out that after China, we heard about Italy, we heard about the Europe, and then the first Indonesian case was in the March 2nd. 2nd of March was the first case of COVID-19 positive in Indonesia. It started in Depok. And then after that, we were also surprised by the news that one of the cabinet member, Minister Budi Karya, Minister of Transportation, was also contracted the virus. And then after that, by mid of March, the government decided that it's time to provide, to establish the what we call the social distancing. Social distancing, and then the government come up with the tagline that working from home, school from home, as well as going on our religious affairs from home. So, and after that, the case of COVID-19 continued to increase, and it's not only in Indonesia, but also we follow the increase of the COVID-19 infections all over the world. Right now, it's quite severe, and we do not know for sure when it's going to be ended. It's very important that the course toward the vaccine is continue, but it is very important that we understand the best way to handle this virus issue is to stop its spreading. So we get into the issue of health crisis. There is a virus with no vaccine and clearly with no medicine. So the best way to handle this issue is to try to stop its spread. And the way that we can stop its spread is by restricting the mobility. Restricting the mobility from people going to school, going to work, going for their religious affairs, and of course restricting the mobility of the people ends up with the economic slowdown. It is not only about going to school or going to work, but it's about social issue, because a lot of people cannot go to their religious affairs, their working places, and also going to school. And at the end, it's create the economic problems. It creates the economic crisis. And we understand that with this economic crisis, there is a disruption about the global value chain. There is a travel ban, the commodity issue, market panic, the internal shock. It's continuing. I hope that you are able to see my presentation here, because on my screen there is still something that is going on circling, but on the back I can see that the presentation is moving. So I'm talking about the economic shock. Economic shock means that there is a job and income loss. There is also the GDP losses, consumption going down, investment is not realized, trade is hampered, and so on. And of course, what we don't want to happen subsequently is it's possible that the economic crisis may bring in financial crisis. This is what we have to work very hard not to have this financial crisis. We are working very hard, trying to understand what is going on and then how it's going to impact the financial sector. And at the same time, we are also it's very important to understand that the poverty alleviation may also increase, Gini ratio may also increase, and it is very important to understand the impact on growth, the growth itself. So that this is the impact to Indonesia. That's already on the first quarter of 2020, our growth was only 2.97% year on year. And the second quarter number will be released tomorrow. We expect it will be around, it will be minus. Indonesian economy will be on the minus side. And the minus, according to the Ministry of Finance, our estimation is around 5%. Minus 5%, but the official number, let's wait until tomorrow when it is declared by the statistics office. For the whole 2020, we expect the Indonesian economy will be between minus 0.4% to 2.3%, but right now we think that 2.3% as the upper bound is way too high. We expect that the Indonesian economy will be around minus 0.4 until 1% economic growth for the whole year of 2020. And of course, this is going to be very, very severe for Indonesia because Indonesia is used to grow at the level of around 5%. Of course, we continue to look at the market data, and we see some despite the fact that we see some pandemic, but we do see some improvement in the data around the month of June. So if you look at go to the next slide, the Google Mobility Index started to come up on the lower left graph. The Google Mobility Index 7-day moving average showed some increase. The real sector sales, export, and confidence is not yet there. Financial sector, if you look at the bond yields, there is an improvement of our bond yields. This morning, I just got the report that our producers manufacturing index, our PMI, is still below 50, but right now at the level of 46. And last month was 39. So 39 last month on June, and then 46 on July. And we expect that it will be very soon going to the higher than 50 level. The different economies around the world already get into the recession. Officially speaking, recession is 2 consecutive months of negative economic growth year on year. And a lot of economies already on the negative side for for 2 consecutive quarters. Now, everyone then start to think about what is the recovery, what kind of recovery that the world going to go up. Let's go to slide number 12. And here you will see the different kinds of recovery shape in terms of the GDP. There is a shape that go down and stay on the below. Of course, there is also a U shape. There is a V shape where things go down very quickly and then go up also very quickly. There is an L shape where the things are not very improving. And Reuters actually in April conducted a Reuters poll, and the polling actually says that 56% of the world economists suggested that it will be a U shape. That is the result that you see on the lower left. So the U shape means that there will be some, it's not going to go back up very directly. U shape means that the economy will go down very severe, and there will be some time that the economy will be at the lower level before it's going back up at some time in the future. And different surveys are already there, and you can go to the social media very easily, looking at the different surveys that are available in that you can read. And then basically the general consensus is that this pandemic economic impact will continue until 2021. It's not going to end very soon in 2020. It will go until 2021, but even going to the 2022. So, and the company will have effect. It will impacting the company. It will impacting the business travels. It will impacting the total employment. A lot of employment will be affected. And also it will be a lot of people says that this pandemic will change the world in the big time. So actually, if we go into the retrospect about this pandemic, I think it's very fair to say that every single one of us who are still entrusted with managing the situation, that who are living right now, we have a historical, we are living in a historical period where this kind of pandemic, this is not something that is taking place every decade. This is not the kind of pandemic that is happening every 50 years. This is the kind of pandemic that is happening in a century time. So, and then some of you probably understand that the last time that we had this kind of pandemic, the worldwide pandemic, was the Spanish flu, which dates back to the 1918, basically a century ago. Right now, we are living in this period, all of you, including me, and then we have this historical responsibility to manage this situation, manage it from our own individual, ourselves, our family, our community, and our country as well, and as well as our world. This is a historical responsibility that will be very important for the next generation. How are we going to handle this? What is the government adaptive responses in the short run, and also what does the Indonesia will do? Ladies and gentlemen, I remember that back in March, there was a G20 meeting. There was a G20 meeting And that was the first time that the G20 meeting was held virtually, like what we are doing now, through a webinar. Usually a G20 meeting, this is a ministerial level of the G20 country. During that meeting, that is the first time that we conducted in virtually, and it was very interestingly, every single country and all of the international institutions that who were invited to that meeting responded that COVID-19 is going to change the world. So different countries start to compare notes on how they're going to respond. Can we still on the page 16, please, presentation, the G20. So during that G20 meeting, every single member of the G20 start to mention all about this. Malaysia mentioning about the assistance to the affected businesses. Australia start to talk about tax, direct cash assistance. South Korea, Germany, US, Singapore. Singapore was the also putting very big stimulus to the economy. And it is very important that one of the important results, conclusion of that G20 meeting at the time is that each country will come back again to the G20 Secretariat to tell how much stimulus that they prepare for their own economy. So this is a problem that very clear starting in the March meeting of the G20 is going to be worldwide. And of course, Indonesia is not an exception. Despite the fact that the first case was identified on the March the 2nd, but after that, Indonesia is affected quite severely, I can say. And for a country as big as Indonesia, the level of infection is going to be different from one region after another. Indonesia is a very big country that impact is going to be spatially distributed, and different regions will have different impacts, and this is very important to be taken into account. Can we go to slide number 18? Slide number 18, please. Yeah, so this is the 8 provinces that are highly infected, despite the fact that this is only 8 provinces, but these 8 provinces account for 65% of Indonesia's GDP. So the level of impact is different from one region to another. So it is very important that on how we handle this is going to be also very important to take into account the regional distribution. And what is the logic of the government in managing this COVID-19 issue? It's in handling this COVID-19 issue, the government thinks that one of the most important things is to remember continuously that this is a health problem. This is a virus problem. So that's why the first thing is to deal with the health issue and to save people. So that is number one priority on the government's agenda in handling this COVID-19. So that's why the government put in very important, high increase of health expenditures, upgrading our hospitals, buying all of the medicine, the test kits, and so on and so forth. So one and foremost, this is health issue. So save lives is the number one priority. The second priority on the government minds is to deal with the affected group of society. And the affected group of society out of this COVID, because the COVID is reducing the economic activity, the most the most affected group of the population is the poor. So that's why the second priority of the government is the social protection. Social protection, employment support, and also a lot of reduction in the people's burden of life. So that's why the government continue to provide the cash transfer. The government also gives the discount on the electricity bill. The government also provides different other supports that may reduce the burden of households. So that is the second priority. The third priority of the government is to support the micro, small, and medium enterprises, protecting the business sector. And protecting the business sector starts with the very, very micro and small enterprises. So these are three important areas where the government is very, very focused in providing the support to the economy through the government budget. So if we go to slide number 21, you will see what we call the economic recovery programs on the right and the health program budget on the left. So the health program budget is accounted 87.5 trillion Indonesian rupiah, and the economic recovery program 607.65 trillion Indonesian rupiah, and the economic recovery programs are divided into 5 different expenditure categories: social protection and support for the sectoral and regional government, the micro, small, medium enterprises support, helping the corporate financing, and also business incentives. Business incentives on the lower right is basically tax incentives. We understand that the tax incentives may not be the ultimate tools to help the business sectors, because during this COVID-19, we understand that business is also slowing down. Because the business is slowing down, then most likely the business incentives is not going to directly help the business sectors right away. But the business incentives are already put in place by the government in order to anticipate the recovery program. We understand that during the recovery, business incentives will help the business sectors. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you combine the health programs, the economic recovery programs all together, the total budget that is spent by the government is 695 trillion Indonesian rupiah, almost 700 trillion. Additional spending by the central government on the state budget to deal with the health and economic recovery program. And of course, when we put this 700 trillion extra spending in our budget, then our budget is increasing very fast. Please go to slide number 23. You will see that this is the state budget 2020. The first column of numbers are the original state budget 2020, which was enacted back in October 2019. And you will see that on the second number from below, you will see the deficits as the percentage of the GDP. So originally the budget was only set at the 1.76% deficit, the budget deficit as a percentage of the GDP. Immediately after we had this issue about the COVID-19, we understand that the government revenue will go down because the economic activity will slow down. Expenditures must go up, so the deficit must increase. So when the deficit increase, initially we think that the deficit will increase to around 5.07% of the GDP. That was around April. But then after further deliberations in the government, with the business sectors, with the different other stakeholders in the economy, we decided that back in June, we continue to expand our budget deficits to 6.34% of the GDP. And if you look at the number of the deficits, from the original budget was 307 trillion Indonesian rupiah, 307.2 trillion Indonesian rupiah, it increased to 1,039.2 trillion Indonesian rupiah. So this is an increase of around 700 trillion Indonesian rupiah. Fairly, this is because of the government spending on health and economic recovery programs. These are the deficit that must be financed by the budget, and of course, by financing the deficit, we have to issue the government debt. So the government debt is increasing very steeply from, I'm not sure if there is here we have the presentation, but with the as we are financing the deficits, the government debt to GDP ratio will increase from 30% to around 37%. The government debt to GDP ratio will increase from 30%, which is what we have in 2019 before the COVID, to increasing to 37% of the GDP. This is quite a steep increase. That's why we are thinking very hard on how the government budget can continue to perform its function, can continue to perform its function as a good budget. So that's why we come with a discussion with our colleague at the Central Bank of Indonesia on how. Excuse me. Sorry. So let me continue. Okay, so let me continue. So in anticipation of this very big burden on the budget, as I mentioned earlier, the debt to GDP ratio is going to increase from 30% to 37%. Then the government also have to pay attention to the the ratio of interest payment to the total spending. This ratio is very important. Why? Because that is a measure of the fiscal space. If because of this debt, the government has to increase the interest payment to the total spending, and if the increase is too steep, that means the fiscal space going to be limited in the future. If the fiscal space is limited in the future, that will limit the government's ability to recover for the economic recovery. So that is why in a number of months, we continue to discuss with our colleague at the central bank on how should we share the burden of the COVID-19 expenditures. So this is what is called the burden sharing. Yeah, it's very important to mention about the burden sharing program. This is a synergy between the government and the central bank in order to promote fiscal sustainability in the future and to restore market confidence, making sure that the central bank's balance sheet is also continue to be healthy together with the government budget and government balance sheet. So the way that we design the burden sharing program is that on the government decided on there are three categories of government debt. Number one is the public goods expenditure, and the burden sharing between the government and the Bank Indonesia is that all interests are paid for by the Bank Indonesia. And then the second component, it is the second component of the non-public goods. So this is basically the business sector benefit. Spending on the business sector benefit is the burden sharing with the government, between the government and the Bank Indonesia is that the government will pay the interest up to 100 basis points below the monetary operation level. and other expenditures will continue as the usual. The government will pay all of the market interest. So if some of you are in the monetary economics branch or public finance professors and would like to discuss this further, I'm more than happy, and my colleagues at the Ministry of Finance will be more than happy to discuss this in the greater detail if you need to discuss further about how the burden sharing between the government and the central bank is taken care of in Indonesia. I think there are several references in the international media that is already coined the Indonesian burden sharing scheme between the government and the central bank as a model, as a burden sharing model which emerging countries may come up with. We have already announced this to the public and also to our investors, and as a result, I think the acceptance of our investors are quite positive, and we continue to expect that investors' confidence on Indonesia will continue to be okay to the future with the current burden sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now go to my final slide. Can we go to slide number 24? I would like to describe to you a little bit about the challenges that faced by the government during this time of the crisis, and for the government's effort to help the economy. Number one is that it is very important that if we would like to conduct a good program in a proper way, then we must have a good data. Data is very important, and it is sometimes we are lacking the data. If we would like to conduct cash transfer, Indonesia has the data for the lowest 40% of by name by address of the lowest 40% of the individual and households. We have the data, but if you ask about whether we have a good database for the people in the deciles 5, 6, 7, we don't. We do not have the data for those categories. So we must come up with a more creative strategy on how to reach out to them. For the lowest category of the population, deciles number 1, number 2, because we have already the data, we already have a cash transfer program, and we channel our cash transfer program by banks through financial institutions. It is easy. It is easy to expand. It is easy to increase the benefit. It is easy to increase the interval, the payment interval. Our conditional cash transfer program, which is used to be by quarterly payment, right now we conduct by monthly payment of the same amount, monthly payment of the same amount. So it's easy. But for the deciles, the middle class, which is getting their income regularly from work, right now we have to think about how to reach them for cash transfer or other measures. Number 2, the lessons that I would like to convey to you as well during this time of the crisis is that it is very important that the policymakers can be anticipative instead of looking only at the historical data. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier in my beginning of this presentation, if you look at imagine that during March of this year, after we had our first case of COVID-19 positive in Indonesia, if we look at the historical data of January and February, there is no problem. There is no problem in our January and February data. But we understand that after we have the positive COVID-19 case, then problem going to be worsening. economy will slow down, and that is why it is very important to be able to predict what's going to happen in April, May, and June. And I can tell you that in Indonesian case, our Perpu, our emergency law, that is the government regulation in lieu of the law, or what we call in Indonesia the Perpu. Our Perpu is built upon the situation, the emergency situation, not from its historical January and February data. Because if we are looking at January and February data, there is no emergency. Emergency will come in April, May, and June, and July, and maybe even now. Still, we are still in emergency. But we have to establish the emergency situation in March, before the things going south, before things getting worse. So it is very important to understand historical data must be complemented with the projections, and we must stand behind our projection. So the other thing that is also I would like to convey in this discussion, in the final notes of the lessons learned, is that during the government policy implementation, sometimes we are forced to adjust the policy in a very quick time. Very quick, we have to adjust the policy. It is very important that we understand that policies should be adjustable, policy should be adaptable, and policy should be flexible. Without that flexibility, without that ability to adapt, then we will get stuck in the policy that is going to be too rigid. The situation continues to be very dynamic, but the policy should follow through. Now, in the Indonesian bureaucracy system, usually rigidity is a way to preserve accountability. This is something that is going to be very dangerous during the time of the crisis. So it is very important that bureaucracy understands that adaptability can also be accountable. Speed can also be accountable. So there is no trade-off between the speed of the program, or the speed of the implementation of the program, and the accountability. Sometimes it is not very straightforward. I mean, like sometimes our bureaucracy does not understand this directly, but this is the kind of continuous discussion that we have in the cabinet, as well as in the bureaucracy within the ministry. This is also the message that our president continued to convey, that is, there is a need for speed of implementation and accountable at the same time. So that's why we continue to liaise with all of the law enforcement agency, the police, the Attorney General Office, or even the KPK, the Anti-Corruption Office, in order to make sure that to show them that we can be very dynamic, we can be very dynamic in terms of the policy formulation, and at the same time we continue to be accountable with the program that is being implemented. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the continuous challenge for all of our bureaucracy. And of course, it is at my final note is that it's very important to continue to listen to the expert and the data. So with that, I'm very happy that Lambung Mangkurat University is conducting this seminar. I wish you all a good and useful as well as fruitful discussions with all of the panel speakers, and hopefully it is going to be useful for the Lambung Mangkurat University to propose policy formulations either at the regional level for the local economy as well as for our national economy. So thank you once again for the invitation, and have a good day. And for everyone, please stay safe and please be healthy continuously. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih kepada Pak Wamen, Prof. Suhasya Nazara yang telah memaparkan materi beliau pada hari ini. Sebenarnya dari peserta ada beberapa pertanyaan untuk Pak Wamen, tapi karena beliau juga kami diinformasikan oleh staf beliau bahwa beliau akan memimpin rapat setelah ini. Sayang sekali, mungkin pertanyaan itu akan kita simpan untuk diskusi panel nanti. Sekali lagi,
why don't you choose 2 or 3 questions, and I'll be happy to answer for the next 5 minutes or so.
Oke, thank you. Pak Wamen, karena sebagian besar dari audiens kita ini berbahasa Indonesia, supaya kita juga bisa mengakomodasikan, juga nanti ada baiknya saya akan bacakan ada 2 atau 3 pertanyaan.
Silakan.
Yang berkenaan dengan paparan Pak Wamen tadi. Yang pertama adalah dari Muhammad Adi Surya Pratama. Dia menanyakan adalah, apakah kemajuan teknologi, khususnya di payment system, itu termasuk debit and credit card, membantu pemerintah dalam mengatasi dampak dari pandemik COVID-19 ini? Itu yang pertama. Yang kedua adalah dari Hendra. Bapak Hendra ini adalah lecturer di Faculty of Economic and Business. Beliau menanyakan, apakah Indonesia akan masuk ke dalam resesi? Keadaan resesi, yang pertama. Mengingat bahwasanya di kuartal pertama itu kita sudah 2.97%. Jadi ada slowdown dari year-on-year 2019. Kemudian, in case dalam perspektif Kalimantan Selatan, apakah Kalimantan Selatan ini juga bisa survive ya? Melihat tadi itu dengan GDP, kembangan GDP 1,1%, dengan highly infected provinsi yang masuk dalam 8 besar provinsi yang terkena menyumbang besar dalam kasus infeksi COVID-19. Itu dari Bapak Hendra. Yang kemudian yang ketiga, yang terakhir dari Ibu Musdalifah menanyakan, apakah economic turbulence ini mungkin ini 2 dulu, Pak.
Oke.
Saya dijawab, silakan, Pak.
Oke, makasih. Pertama saya coba jawab ya, yang kemajuan teknologi. Tadi pertanyaannya, jadi pakai bahasa Indonesia aja ya?
Ya.
Nggak apa-apa ya? Oke.
Ya.
First yang ini tentang yang kemajuan teknologi. Tadi kan pertanyaannya adalah tentang bagaimana kemajuan teknologi di sistem pembayaran membantu atau enggak. Sangat membantu. Ibu Bapak sekalian, untuk yang kelompok paling bawah itu 10%, 20%, 30% terendah itu, sekarang itu kalau kita membayarkan program keluarga harapan atau transfer bantuan pangan non tunai itu lewat bank. Jadi uangnya itu lewat bank dan dia bisa ambil lalu kemudian bisa belanja. Dan ini menjadi sangat-sangat penting. Lalu progres yang udah kita miliki selama beberapa waktu terakhir, yang segala macam itu pembayaran lewat pembayaran non tunai, itu membantu. Saya yakin 3 bulan, 4 bulan terakhir Ibu Bapak sekalian sering sekali belanja lewat pembayaran non tunai. Beli makanan online, beli ke supermarket juga sebagian online, terus kemudian barang kebutuhan sehari-hari juga belinya sekarang online, dan ini sangat membantu ya. Nah, bahkan kita melihat bahwa dalam cara kita melakukan interaksi pun juga seperti ini nih, virtual webinar. Nggak kebayang ini, saya yakin pasti nggak ada, saya berani taruhan pasti nggak ada di dalam rencana kerja Pak Rektor bikin webinar di bulan Agustus ini, rencana ini pasti nggak ada di bulan Februari kemarin. Ini pasti muncul baru sekarang gitu. Dan ini adalah sesuatu yang sangat positif kita bisa melakukan dengan bantuan teknologi. Ternyata sekarang semua bisa menyesuaikan diri. Pembelajaran jarak jauh, lalu kuliah online. lalu kemudian belanja online. Beberapa teman-teman saya tahu bahwa kalau mereka ke gerejanya juga online. Ke gereja aja bisa online sekarang. Jadi yang seperti ini ternyata kemajuan teknologi itu bisa mempengaruhi berbagai macam kehidupan kita sehari-hari dan bisa diterima. Nah, Ibu Bapak sekalian, kantor pun sekarang juga work from home. Kami di Kementerian Keuangan mungkin yang masuk kantor itu sekarang hanya sekitar 20% dari pegawai. Akhirnya apa? Dan itu pun mungkin akan kita turunkan lagi. Ini saya sekarang melakukan ini dari rumah, bukan dari kantor. Kami melakukan dari rumah. Sidang kabinet bisa dengan online, dari rumah. Saya bisa menghadiri sidang kabinet dari rumah. Dan artinya yang begitu kemajuan teknologi, sistem pembayaran, lalu kemudian virtual meeting dan sebagainya, bisa dilakukan. Nah, Ibu Bapak sekalian, kalau kayak kami di Kementerian Keuangan itu sekarang udah mulai berpikir apa iya kita butuh ruangan kantor yang segede-gede, yang besar-besar itu. Karena sebagian besar sekarang saya ke kantor baru mungkin sebulan terakhir saya ke kantor seminggu sekali. Sampai kantor itu pun kerjanya Zoom-nya online, melakukan meeting secara online. Nah jadi mungkin saya nggak perlu ruangan yang terlalu besar, saya nggak perlu space yang terlalu besar di kantor, kita mungkin bisa lebih efisien. Namun dengan seluruh efisiensi yang kita pikirkan itu, belakangan kami di Kementerian Keuangan juga udah mulai memikirkan ada downside-nya nggak sih ini? Mungkin ada. Ada hal yang mesti kita waspadai. Bagaimana kita sekarang akan kehilangan interaksi personal. Kita kehilangan respons yang sifatnya itu immediate. Saya akan kehilangan dengan Ibu Bapak sekalian kalau kemarin dikontak oleh Pak Henry Mansyah, Pak ke Universitas Lambung Mangkurat. Mungkin kalau saya pergi langsung fisik ke Universitas Lambung Mangkurat, saya bisa ketemu Ibu Bapak sekalian. Dan kita bisa langsung bertatap muka. Itu tetap sesuatu yang berbeda dibandingkan virtual. Tapi paling enggak sekarang ini dianggap mencukupi dan dianggap sangat-sangat meyakinkan. Jadi Ibu Bapak sekalian, kita kita memasuki periode yang akan sangat berbeda dan teman-teman yang ada di universitas akan menjadi teman-teman yang betul-betul perlu merumuskan seperti apa sih Indonesia ke depan, seperti apa sih universitas kita ke depan, seperti apa Lambung Mangkurat akan menyikapi hal ini, seluruh proses pembelajaran dan yang lain-lainnya. Mungkin saya berhenti di situ dulu kalau nggak nanti jadi kepanjangan membahas soal kemajuan teknologi. Yang kedua adalah tentang apakah Indonesia masuk ke dalam resesi. Jadi pertanyaan tentang resesi ini muncul agak ramai nih di media massa gitu ya. Lalu kemudian kenapa? Sayangnya menurut saya munculnya ramai di media massa ini biasanya lebih tertarik kepada labelnya, kepada status label dari resesi. Padahal yang kita hadapi adalah perekonomian yang lagi turun, dan kalau perekonomian turun itu, teman-teman di kelompok ekonomi itu yakin bahwa itu semua lakukan adjustment. Ya, adjustment. Kalau ada COVID-19 ya adjustmentnya adalah berhenti bekerja. Nah, perekonomiannya turun, iya betul. Tetapi kemudian label-label seperti label resesi itu nggak nolong sama sekali menurut saya gitu. Nah, tapi katakanlah sekarang kita ngomong resesi. Apa tuh artinya resesi di dalam teori ekonomi? Resesi di dalam teori ekonomi adalah situasi di mana kalau terjadi pertumbuhan itu negatif selama 2 kuartal berturut-turut. Jadi 2 kuartal berturut-turut perekonomiannya tumbuhnya negatif. Nah, Ibu Bapak sekalian, kita lihat kasusnya Indonesia. Ya. Kalau di kasusnya Indonesia, kuartal 1 Indonesia itu tumbuhnya 2,97%. Artinya positif, tidak negatif kuartal 1. Kuartal 2, yaitu bulan April, Mei, dan Juni, berapa Indonesia tumbuhnya? Tunggu besok. Hari Rabu besok nih, Badan Pusat Statistik akan mengumumkan angkanya. Tapi estimasi kami negatif. Jadi, kalau betul besok diumumkan negatif, maka Indonesia kuartal keduanya negatif. Pertanyaannya, kuartal ketiga bagaimana? Kan tadi kan kita bilang resesi itu adalah kalau 2 kuartal berturut-turut ya. Artinya, kuartal 3 jadi pertanyaan. Kuartal 3 bagaimana nanti? Kuartal 3 itu adalah bulan Juli, Agustus, dan September. Ini yang lagi kita lewati sekarang ini. Kita sekarang bulan Agustus ya toh. Berarti kita akan menyelesaikan kuartal 3 nanti bulan September, dan kita tentu berharap bahwa Indonesia tidak negatif lagi. Nah, pertanyaannya, bisa nggak Indonesia itu tidak negatif lagi di kuartal ketiga? Tergantung konsumsi, tergantung kepada pengeluaran pemerintah, dan tergantung kepada investasi dan ekspor. Nah, ini yang lagi kita kejar. Kita berharap sih nggak negatif. Tapi kalau sampai negatif, ya jangan khawatir dengan urusan label. Nah, ini yang message yang mau saya sampaikan. Yang harus kita lihat adalah trennya. Nah, kita berusaha supaya kuartal 3 itu pokoknya apapun trennya, pokoknya trennya harus positif. Artinya, pertumbuhan ekonomi kuartal 3 harus lebih baik dibandingkan pertumbuhan ekonomi kuartal 2. Kuartal 2 itu kemarin bulan Mei dan Juni itu kalau menurut berbagai macam indikator itu yang paling parah. Paling parah tuh. Nah, apakah indikator itu bisa jadi lebih parah lagi di kuartal 3? Nah, tergantung kepada kesehatannya. Nah, ini balik lagi ke cerita saya tadi. Urusan COVID ini yang paling utama masalah kesehatannya. Jangan sampai ada second wave. Kalau second wave, tutup lagi, drop lagi. Nah, supaya nggak ada second wave gimana? Supaya nggak ada second wave, maka kita praktekkan protokol-protokol kesehatan. Jadi ekonomi dan kesehatan itu sekarang harus jadi satu dia. Kalau kita membuka ekonomi, kegiatan ekonomi, tapi protokolnya nggak kita pedulikan, ya itu bisa menjadi disaster. Tapi kalau kita membuka ekonomi dan protokolnya kita jalankan, kita pakai masker, kita cuci tangan, kita jaga jarak, maka bisa jadi kegiatan ekonominya muncul, tapi tidak akan terjadi second wave. Nah, ini tentu menjadi sangat local spesifik. Ini yang tadi saya katakan, karena antar satu tempat, satu provinsi dengan provinsi lain, bahkan jangan-jangan antar satu kota dengan satu kota lain itu bisa berbeda-beda di Indonesia. Karena kita ini sedemikian besarnya. Karena itu Ibu Bapak sekalian, gayanya Jakarta, tempat saya tinggal, ya beda dengan gayanya Surabaya, dan pasti beda dengan teman-teman di luar Jawa. Tergantung dari penularan dan juga intensitas masing-masing. Namun teman-teman dari universitas yang merupakan kelompok kaum terpelajar, moga-moga bisa memberikan pemahaman terus kepada komunitas kita bahwa segalanya ini tergantung kepada kesehatan ini sekarang. Ini adalah krisis kesehatan. Kalau kita tangani kesehatannya dengan baik, maka kita bisa ekonominya tetap berkembang dan berjalan tanpa harus terjadi kontraksi yang terlalu dalam. Tapi kalau Mei dan Juni kemarin kontraksinya memang dalam. Semua data menunjukkan kontraksi dalam. Juli sudah mulai ada opening. Kita berharap Agustus dan September akan jauh lebih baik, sehingga kuartal ketiga nanti kita bisa mendapatkan pertumbuhan ekonomi yang lebih baik dan kita terhindar dari label resesi. Saya kira demikian yang bisa saya sampaikan.
Boleh satu, Prof.
Dilanjutkan
Boleh satu,
dengan
Prof.
diskusi lebih lanjut.
Perwakilan perempuan, Prof. Boleh satu, Prof.
Nanya aja ke moderator, jangan ke saya.
Gimana,
Ya.
moderator?
Kami, karena beliau sudah menginform untuk 2-3 ya, jadi ini mungkin waktu beliau untuk beraktivitas karena beliau akan memimpin. Jadi mohon maaf Ibu Dr. Musdalifah, nanti kita bisa simpan di panel discussion ya.
Makasih banyak semuanya, semoga sehat semua. Sampai ketemu, moga-moga ada kesempatan ketemu di lain waktu, webinar atau ketemu fisik. Makasih, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam. Terima kasih, Prof.
Terima kasih, Pak Hasil. Thank you, terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Ya, kita sudah selesai di keynote speaker di first round ya. Jadi saya coba untuk mix sekarang karena most audience adalah berbahasa Indonesia. Jadi nanti Pak Jayan Menon dalam bahasa Inggris. Kita coba supaya semua partisipan juga bisa menikmati begitu dalamnya pembahasan tadi ya. Dan kita mengambil benefit dan bagaimana kemudian kita juga bisa berkontribusi. Oke, kita sekarang masuk ke second round of this webinar ya. Kita punya two distinguished speaker. Before we proceed to main program, I will introduce our distinguished speaker. The first one is Dr. Jayan Menon. He is a visiting senior fellow at the IESP Yusuf Ishak Institute in Singapore. Following his early retirement from the ADB in Manila at IESP, he continued to work on trade and investment issues in the region, but with more of a research focus. His last post at ADB was lead economist in the office of the chief economist. He was also at the ADB Institute in Tokyo from 2005 and 2008. He started work as academic in Australia, spending almost a decade at the Center of Policy Studies at Monash University and its original campus in Clayton, Melbourne. He has also worked at the University of Melbourne, Victoria University, and the American University in Washington, D.C. He held a young appointment with the Australian National University, University of Nottingham, UK, and IESP Malaysia. He has served as board of director of Cambodia Development Resource Institute and the advisory board of University of Nottingham, Malaysia. He has also edited 15 books, more than 40 chapters in book, and 80 article peer-reviewed journal. He held a Bachelor of Economics with honors, first class from La Trobe University, and Master and PhD degree in Economics from the University of Melbourne, Australia. The second distinguished speaker is Professor Muhammad Handri Mansa. He got PhD from 2002 in Economics from University of Queensland, Brisbane, Australia. His research interests are macroeconomic policy, economic modeling, financial crisis, early warning modeling, regional economics, and environmental economics. He was an Endeavour Fellowship visiting researcher at Queensland University of Technology in 2007 and visiting lecturer at University of Malaya in 2009. His master degree was obtained in 1992 from Department of Agricultural Economics, Mississippi State University of Starkville, USA, in the field of agribusiness management. He is BSc in Economics and Development Studies, graduated from Gajah Mada University in 1995. In 1985, he won Best Young Researcher in Economic Health by Levy in 1997, and the second winner of paper competition on financial stability held by Bank Indonesia in 2008. He obtained triple grant as a young scholar to present paper in Macerata, Italy, from International Input-Output Association in 2000. He frequently worked as consultant for international financial institutions and published several books and papers in national and international journals. He is member of Indonesian Economics Association, Indonesian Regional Science Association, Regional Science Association International. He has taught macroeconomics, development economics, monetary policy, and central banking policy and development problem, Indonesia economy in undergraduate program since 1987. He also taught regional economic development planning and Indonesia economy at postgraduate level in Lambung Mangkurat University. Please welcome the first speaker is Dr. Jayan Menon. Your time is 15 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me clearly? Oh, excellent. Yes. So let me thank the organizers, Lambung Mangkurat University, and also your participants today for having me. I enjoyed listening to the Vice Minister in his presentation earlier. So in 15 minutes today, I want to talk to you. Actually, I have a small set of slides, and maybe the handler can help me with projecting the slides on the screen. What I want to do with you today is talk about the economic impacts of this crisis, pandemic, and then a bit about the social consequences, and finally talk a bit about where we go from here now that we've had more than 7 months since the first case was identified in Wuhan at the end of last year. While they try and put up the slides, I will just quickly give you an introduction. I think, you know, as economists, very often we have a tendency to forget that the COVID-19 outbreak is first and foremost a human tragedy. It is important to remind ourselves of this reality. It is a horrible human tragedy, but it's also having widespread economic impacts. Now, these impacts are coming mostly from our attempts to contain the spread of the virus, not directly from the virus itself. While the virus itself is causing untold human suffering and death, the economic impacts are mostly arising out of our response to the virus and trying to contain its spread, mostly through social distancing measures that are being implemented by different countries. And there's a lot of variation in the way countries, even in this region, in the Southeast Asian region, have responded. And several countries had hard lockdowns. Indonesia, I believe, has taken a more moderate approach of employing social distancing measures without totally shutting down the economy. So I think this midway approach is recognizing that we need to balance both the health effects and the economic impacts, as the Vice Minister mentioned, especially in countries, in developing countries, where there are a large number of poor people. The poor, of course, it's very difficult. I will tell you when to change the slides, please. So yes, please leave it at this slide at the moment. For the poor, of course, you know, it's not really a choice between lives or livelihoods. They're both one and the same thing in most cases. So while the Western world, the richer developed countries can argue about, you know, how we balance lives versus livelihoods and how much of a lockdown or how long of a lockdown we should have. In poor countries, it's a false choice. Locking down for prolonged periods can cause more harm than, please go back to the earlier slide, if you don't mind. I'll tell you when to change them. Okay. I will let you know when to change them, please. Yeah. So when you have a large number of poor, locking down can cause more harm than the virus itself. So we need to bear that in mind, given the circumstances in individual countries. And when it comes to the poor, lockdowns may not even work because you cannot force people to stay at home when they have to scavenge or beg for a living. If you're very poor, you don't have running water within your house, you cannot obey lockdown measures because of survival, right? So lockdowns are not only inappropriate, they usually fail when countries have large proportions of the poor. Okay, so that's the context. I think we need to bear in mind the special circumstances of each country, and developing countries may require a different response from developed countries, especially if governments cannot provide the safety net to keep people at home or locked down and support their living costs. I lived in the Philippines, in Manila, for more than 20 years when working at the ADB. And just today, the Philippines is reintroducing a lockdown, as you may have heard, because of the spike in infections. And yesterday, in making the announcement, the president said that they have no money for food for the poor. Now, this is actually totally unacceptable, to force people to stay at home, not allow them to work, not allow them to even scavenge for a living, and not provide them with the means of survival, right? So I think governments have to be more responsible when imposing this kind of restriction on movement when they have large amounts of the poor that are income and asset poor and cannot actually survive without working day to day. Their incomes are earned on a day-to-day basis, and also who cannot afford, when governments cannot afford to subsidize their costs of living when they force them to stay at home. Right. So that's the context. Now let me move on to focus on some of the economic impacts. You can see here in this slide the forecast from the IMF in the World Economic Outlook. The IMF produced their first set of forecasts in April, and by June they've had to revise them downwards in almost all cases because things are changing so quickly, and this virus is evolving in uncertain ways. After 7 months, we still don't know when this will end. In fact, what we are seeing right now is a situation where things are worsening in many poor countries, including Indonesia and the Philippines, and also in rich countries like the US, which is now the epicenter of the virus. And of course, the situation in India is also, quite serious, and Brazil, as well as in the Middle East. So we haven't seen it spread to Africa in a significant way yet, and hopefully it won't, but that could be another concern for the future. So the IMF had to revise their forecast. I've highlighted the forecast for Indonesia. You can see them in the first row in bold. And Vice Minister earlier talked about whether Indonesia might have a recession if it has 2 quarters of negative growth. In the first quarter, you grew by almost 3%, a positive sign. And I believe your second quarter numbers are coming out Hari Rabu, that's tomorrow. So we don't know yet. But according to the IMF, at least, they forecasted that for this year, originally they forecasted that Indonesia would grow by 0.5% this year. But when they revised their forecast in June, they brought that down to minus 0.3% for the year. So based on that, if the IMF is right, then, and they haven't always been right. In fact, they've been wrong more often than right. So in fact, they might even be revising their forecast again, I suspect, before the end of the year. But based on the latest forecast, this may signal a recession coming up. But you need 2 quarters of negative growth. But if you look at that table, Indonesia actually performs a lot better than other ASEAN countries, right? And in fact, it does quite well among the ASEAN +3 region, except for China, right? And in a sense, like China, Indonesia is a huge economy, a huge population, and so domestic demand is a bigger factor driving growth than international factors, and so that is a cushion against the gyrations of the world economy. And this is a good thing at the moment, at least, where the virus is causing a complete shutdown of international travel, tourism. International trade still continues, but of course it's also fallen sharply. The World Trade Organization forecasts even sharper falls going forward. And so being not so reliant on trade and investment can sometimes be a good thing, as we are as Indonesia is experiencing now. Next slide, please. So you can see in this next slide, continuing on with the IMF's forecast, the yellow line is for China, where the IMF thinks the impact will be the smallest. It sees a drop, but a quick recovery. And the blue line, which is right at the bottom, the sharpest fall, is for the advanced economies, right? So the developed countries will suffer the biggest hit, and then the emerging market economies and developing economies is the one that is gray, and it is the one least affected compared. Of course, China is a bit better, but it is it is less than the advanced economies. And then in between, you have the one in brown, which is the world average. Okay, so what we see is that according to the latest IMF forecast, the bottom will be seen in the second quarter, which we are already just passed, and we are supposed to be now on the mend, right? But let's wait and see. The numbers are slowly coming through. There's usually a lag, so hopefully they're right. Hopefully the worst is already behind us, and you can see that they are forecasting a V, not a very sharp V, but a V sort of shaped recovery, and things should improve going forward. Next slide, please. These forecasts vary by forecaster. The IMF is probably the best source. They're the ones that do it, spend the most amount of resources. But more closer to home, ADB and AMRO in Singapore also produce forecasts. Their forecasts are less pessimistic than the IMF's. So hopefully we hope that they are accurate, more accurate than the IMF. Again, I've highlighted the numbers for Indonesia. According to the ADB, Indonesia's growth this year will come in at 2.5. This was done a while ago, and ADB will revise this. I'm sure they'll revise it further down. AMRO, who came out later than the ADB, had Indonesia growing by 0.9%, which is more realistic, but also again here much higher than what the IMF is forecasting. But everyone sees a rebound in 2021, right? So in 2021, we have a sharp rebound. Indonesia should grow by 5% or maybe higher, hopefully, when this pandemic is again, hopefully, overcome. But there's so many uncertainties because the pandemic itself is evolving in uncertain ways. If the shock, which is the pandemic, is uncertain, then it is very difficult to forecast the effects, right? So even when the shock is certain, forecasting the impacts are hard, but when the shock itself is changing, trying to forecast the effects is very hard. But we still have to try, and this is what the different agencies have come out with. Now, finally, if I may, Mr. Moderator, in the next few minutes, let me say a little bit about where we go from here, going forward. I think, as I mentioned, I think in countries, developing countries like Indonesia, there's a need to balance the efforts, to flatten. People talk about flattening the infection curve. I like to think of also flattening the misery curve. The misery curve is what I call the pain that's felt as a result of the response to the virus, right? So the virus causes a lot of pain, but the lockdowns also cause pain, right? So we need to balance the two, especially when you have large proportions of the poor. Again, in rich countries, they can afford to subsidize workers, and also people in the informal sector can receive financial support. But in poor countries, that's not possible, as we've already heard about in the Philippines, where the president has openly said that he can no longer afford to provide even food aid for the poor, right? So this is something that highlights the need to balance the two. Secondly, it's been 7 months, so we know a lot more about this condition than we did in. So initially, we can be excused for reacting or overreacting, right? So locking down because we don't know what's going to happen, we don't know much about the virus, is almost understandable. But now, 7 months later, we cannot make those sorts of errors any longer, right? We know now that this is a highly contagious virus, but it's not a highly deadly virus, right? We know that the mortality rate is probably 5% or maybe lower, right? There are lots of other diseases that have much higher mortality rates that we are spending a lot less resources on, right? TB kills more people in India than this virus will ever kill, and it's actually got a cure, right? So we need to take into account, the fact that while the virus is highly contagious, and it's also, the latest challenge, it needs to be, we need to consider it in the context of various challenges, right? Especially in poor countries where resources are limited and choices need to be made. So I would like to end by saying that I think Indonesia has balanced things quite well. I think there is a need to increase testing. I think a lot of the increase in infection rates that we see is a catch-up in testing as we move towards a desired level of coverage of testing of the population. And we need to bear that in mind, that there is a catch-up when it comes to testing. I know that President Trump says the same thing in the US, but that's a different situation, right? But in poor countries where testing was very low and is slowly catching up, and the increase in the number of cases reported is often reflecting a catch-up in test coverage than a spread in the community, right? But once we factor that in, if there's still community spread, or what we suspect is community spread, then of course we need to bring back strict social distancing measures. But I don't think we should bring back a general lockdown, right? What we should do is be much more targeted in our measures on vulnerable groups, the aged, the elderly that are very prone to dying this infection, and also the poor, right, which cannot observe lockdowns because they are in the informal sector and cannot stay at home because there's no running water, and need to go outside to earn a daily subsistence wage or living. And so we need to take that into account and use specific targeted social distancing measures should there be community transmission. Should we find that the reproductive rate starts increasing above 1, then we should bring back targeted measures, not general lockdowns. And I think Indonesia has done the balance well. If it goes forward in increasing measures, I hope it will do so in a targeted way. So with that, let me thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions and the discussion to follow. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Jayan Menon. Saya hanya mencoba untuk merap up beberapa kesimpulan dari Dr. Jayan Menon tadi. Jadi walaupun Indonesia mengalami tadi itu di gambar itu, di grafik tadi, mengalami kontraksi yang cukup dalam di kuartal kedua, tapi overall di 2020, menurut prediksi dari IMF, kemudian ADB Edo dan Emro Forecast itu still positif ya. Kemudian kata beliau adalah kita perlu menjaga balance antara bagaimana menjalankan proses recovery ekonomi ini dengan upaya untuk melakukan menyetop spreading dari COVID-19 ini. Oke, thank you very much.
Summary yang sungguh jelas dan baik sekali. Ya, terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Oke, fine. You can speak Malay ya.
Boleh.
Kita akan ke second distinct speaker, Professor Handri Imansyah. The floor is yours. Professor Handri, are you there?
Okay.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for allow me to present our small research about the impact of the COVID-19. Okay, let me check. Can you see my presentation? Okay, I want to see whether Indonesia can survive in this situation. Okay. Okay. Okay, my presentation is only for section, there's introduction and economic vulnerability and resilience, and we discuss about the existing condition and some policy option. Okay, I hope you can see the, okay, yeah. We know that the global starts economic recovery in the early 2020, and also Indonesia has a still strong economic growth, but slightly slowed down amid the global economic uncertainty. The strong growth is based on the strong domestic demand aided by amid the slowdown of export growth because of the global slowdown, so our export is slowing down. However, in March, COVID-19 pandemic hit Indonesia, affect severe economic impact. I want to discuss about the potential crisis is still likely to rise, with several indicators showing deterioration. Okay, and we discuss about the economic fragility or vulnerability and resilience. Based on this definition by other researcher, economic vulnerability is a high degree of economic openness and high degree of export concentration. In this sense, I think Indonesia is moderate because our economic openness is only about 30% of the GDP. And of course, the export concentration is also not really bad, I think. So in sense of the vulnerability, Indonesia has a moderate. How about the economic resilience? The term of economic resilience is how we recover quickly from a shock, and how to withstand the effect of a shock, and how to avoid the shock altogether. So this is the how we cope the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In this sense, I try to see macroprudential indicator to evaluate the financial fragility in Indonesia, and also I want to see whether Kaminsky model, signal model, can be used to assess potential crisis. Why we use this one? Because if we know to diagnose the economic health by seeing some indicators, we can see to improve the indicators, and then we can avoid the crisis. As we know that signal model of the Kaminsky has a lot of set indicators, such as current account balance, credit growth, saving growth, real exchange rates, lending and saving interest rate, but many others indicators. That these indicators will affect the economic health of Indonesia. This is a Kaminsky model that we try to model using the data that most of the crisis can be predicted 24 months before the crisis emerges. That's why I want to see whether this signal model can be used to see whether what kind of indicators that it's not good, it's abnormal situation, because crisis means that is unstable in of the indicators. So some of the indicators gives signal. If there are many of the indicators send signal, it become a crisis in the next 24 months. That's the Kaminsky model. So based on this model, you can see that most of the crisis in Indonesia can be predicted accurately, actually. And also in the mini crisis in August 2005, this is based on the indicators. We can see that this model is very useful to diagnose health of the economy, because it contains a lot of indicators that we have the data. We know that right now is usually we call it macroprudential indicators. So based on those model, I try to see whether this model can be used to see what kind of indicators that is not good, send signal to the economy, so we can improve these indicators. Based on this model, I see that some of the short crisis or mini crisis and potential crisis 2020, it's the indicators sends a signal. You can see that total foreign debt is one of the indicators that sends a signal. So we have to be concerned with these indicators, how to manage the foreign debt, and also fiscal deficit. You know that right now the fiscal deficit is widened, and then we have to be concerned with these indicators, and also lending saving interest rate, because saving interest rate right now is very low, and the margin is very high. I mean, the margin rate between lending and saving rate is quite high. Real saving interest rate also is very low. Maybe negative, because the saving interest rate is almost 1 or 2% per year. But there is an inflation rate, it's about 3 or 4% per year. So actually, the real saving interest rate is negative. Another indicators that send a signal in 2020, that's government consumption. So this is, we have to be concerned about the government expenditure, because the high government expenditure, of course, government has to issue the bond to finance the consumption. And then also M2 multiplier growth. As you know that right now central bank can buy the bond in the primary market. It's very dangerous actually, because in the market there's a lot of supply of money. And the last one is credit per GDP growth. So the ratio of credit to GDP growth is also a send signal that it means that these indicators should be improved to avoid the financial crisis. So this is until December 2019. I mean, the signal sent since 2016. So we can see that if something happen, just boom, like that, that's a trigger. The trigger right now is COVID pandemic. So we have the health crisis and then go to the financial crisis. So I try to see the impact of the COVID-19 on unemployment with the reduce of demand by 5%. This is only for trade, hotel and restaurant and transportation in Indonesia. This very, I mean, this is very conservative, but you can see that the impact. I mean, there is a jobless or increase in unemployment about 3.4 million people. So this is very strict simulation. I use input-output table, but I updating using 2019 price using IO 2010. And what about the GDP growth? The GDP growth using the simulation, it will be dropped by minus 1.0. So into 2002, my prediction is minus 1.01. So it's not big difference with IMF and AMRO prediction. Okay, this is you can see that the impact of every sectors for which one the hard one. You can see that the hard one is of course the total one is trade and then manufacturing. You can see that manufacturing is the second one, the hardest the severe one of the impact due to the COVID-19. So let me discuss about how to improve that indicators that send signal. That's I mean the duty of our policymakers to improve the signal, the indicators that send signal to the financial crisis, and of course identify the sectors to be the first to be concerned because of that indicators. And the last one is we have to discuss about potential fraud of fiscal stimuli, because there's a vice minister said that about 1,000 trillion of the fiscal stimuli. So this big fiscal stimuli in the history, even bigger than last financial crisis 1997. That's my presentation. I'd be happy to discuss about this presentation. Thank you. Oke, Pak Hudaya, please take.
Speaker, Pak Hudaya, speaker.
Yes, thank you, Profesor Handri. Menarik sekali ya paparan beliau tadi. Terlihat dengan jelas beliau melakukan simulasi modeling menurut beliau, dan beliau sedikit berbeda dari prediksi IMF dan AMRO. Beliau bahkan tadi menampilkan hitungan-hitungan beliau, kita akan mengalami di 2020 minus 101 tadi. Jadi kita akan mencoba mendiskusikan ini dengan audiens, dan sudah masuk ada beberapa pertanyaan. Saya akan membacakan yang dalam berbahasa Inggris. The first question is from Dr. Musdalifah. The question is, the COVID pandemic is turbulent of economic in the world. Several countries have stated that they have experienced a crisis. How is Indonesia? The second question is, our country is known that 10.3% of workers are women as head of household. Is there any special attention for this group of women? The second question from Ibu Intan Binti, Faculty of Economic and Business. It is headed to Dr. Jayan Menon. The question is, 5 countries which were praised for their excellent policy in handling COVID-19 crisis, such as Singapore, South Korea, Hong Kong, Germany, USA, have provided huge social security fund for their citizens. Few days ago, they were declared fall into a recession. What is your comment regarding their policies in handling the pandemic? What Indonesia should learn from those countries' experience? Thank you. The third question is from Eranus Yoga Kundani. Question is headed for Dr. Jayan. According to Dr. Jayan, what positive factor is the most influential in Indonesia economic growth compared to the other countries in Asia? Mr. Eranus Yoga from Satya Wacana Christian University, Indonesia. And okay, I think you both can answer the first three questions, and then we go after that. We go to the next question.
Right, Henry, you want to go first, or should I?
Yes,
yeah.
You can.
Okay, all right, yes. So thank you very much, and thank you, Henry. I enjoyed listening to your presentation as well. I'm glad to see you're still cranking and churning up the numbers. Very interesting. I guess maybe I'll start with the questions that were directed towards me, and then say a little bit about the other two as well, right? Okay, so I think the question from Ibu Intan here says that the 5 countries that were praised and they, had huge reserves to use, huge stimulus rather, programs to try and avoid or mitigate the economic impacts, but they're still falling into recession, right? So what does that tell us? Well, I think it tells us a few things. The first thing is that this crisis is so deep that the stimulus measures cannot save you completely from a recession, right? So there's not enough money around to save you from going into a recession, because this is a synchronized global slowdown, right? This is even the Asian financial crisis, 97, 98, a lot of Asian countries could export their way out of trouble. Now the whole world is in trouble. So there's no exporting to Mars to help us to get out of this. So there's not enough money there. But I think the stimulus measures are really a holding measure, right? They're designed as a Band-Aid to keep firms from going bankrupt if possible, and to keep people from going bankrupt and people from dying, right? You cannot stimulate an economy while under lockdown, right? As they say, it's like pushing on a string, right? You cannot really do much about it. You need to really get the economy running again as normal before the stimulus measures can really have an impact, right? And for that to happen, we need to get on top of this virus. So I think the lesson for Indonesia is that they should target their limited resources very carefully towards those most in need. It's always helpful to provide it for the poorest, not only because it's important to save lives, but also because the poor will spend almost everything that they receive, right? We know that the marginal propensity to spend for the poor is very high compared to the middle class or the rich that save a lot more. So if you want to get the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak, allocating money to the poor is the right way to increase the spending power, as well as ensuring that you don't, ensuring that you meet your social objectives of helping the most vulnerable groups that are most badly affected by the pandemic, by the virus, and by the measures to contain the virus, right? The poor suffer disproportionately from the measures, from the lockdown or safe distancing measures, right? The second question to me is the one that says, how different economic terms. I think Handri also covered this in his presentation. Indonesia being, as I said, large economy, large domestic domestic sector, so domestic demand has been a cushion, right, in keeping a growth from falling further than it would have otherwise. You can see the countries that are most badly affected economically are the small open economies, right? Singapore, where I'm working now and where I'm staying right now, is probably going to be the worst affected of all ASEAN countries, right? Despite, you know, having the reserves to fund a huge stimulus program, right? And still, because it's so open, so dependent on trade and investment and so on, it'll be the most badly affected, probably the most badly affected. Even Thailand, that relies so heavily on tourism and trade, is also being very badly affected. Indonesia has not been very integrated into the global supply chain or regional value chains. This has not been a good thing in the past, but at the moment, it's not such a bad thing either, right? Because it's not suffering the reverberations, the spillover effects affecting the whole region operating through the supply chain. The supply chain is linking all these countries together and spreading the bad news, right, and the bad effects to each other, just like a virus spreads. So Indonesia, not being so integrated into the value chains, has some cushion against that kind of spillover effects operating through the region. Just one quick response to the other question. I think mentioned about the impact on women. I think this is a very important question. You know, we find that you know, again, like with the poor in general, women again being more negatively impacted by the social distancing measures than other groups in general, right? For instance, I mentioned earlier how the poor cannot be locked down at home if they don't have clean running or drinking water available in their domicile, right? They must go out to get drinking water, and often it's the women that have to go and collect this, right? And they have to collect the water from public utilities where there are crowds gathering to also collect water, right? Which again increases the risk of spread of this virus, right? So these kinds of lockdown measures may have a greater impact on women than men, simply by the very nature of their household duties that they carry out. And we need to be aware of that. And also, we know from evidence that when it comes to retrenchments during economic slowdowns, there's a tendency for women to be let go before men, and they find it again more difficult to re-enter the workforce once the recovery sets in. So these are all things I think we need to bear in mind during and also after the crisis when the recovery starts. So let me stop there and turn it over to Larry.
Okay, thank you, Jay. It's very clear that you answer a lot of the question. I want to share about my opinion about the woman. As Musdalifah said that about 10% of the working labor force is a woman. That's very sad because most of them should be loss of job because of the COVID, and also as you know, as Jay said that they have a lot of risk because of they have to go out to get some water, and also I add something that they have to go to the market. So very crowded. In traditional market, it's very crowded, and there is no, I mean, there's no option to the poor to, I mean, to ask for the delivery service, because delivery service is quite expensive for them. So that's they have to take the risk and go to the traditional market. That's, I mean, that's the risk, and also they have to lose a lot of job. And how about the crisis? Musdalifah has also asked, yeah, this crisis is very different. I mean, it's very deep compared to the 1997 crisis, because 1997 crisis is almost some countries, but this is global. The crisis is global, so we cannot. For example, if we want to the crisis, financial crisis, we can improve or increase the export. So to have we have the I have a lot of currencies, so we can, I mean, because of the financial crisis, so we can improve the export. But right now we cannot export anymore, because the export, how to export? No other countries, no import anymore from other countries. That's the problem. And number 3, about Prof. Satya Wacana, I get lost the question.
Yes. The question is, according to Dr. Jayan, what positive factor is the most influential in Indonesia economic growth compared to other countries in Asia?
Oh yeah, that's maybe I can add, I mean, very similar, because Indonesia, the openness of the country is not very wide like Singapore, so we can rely on domestic demand. So in some way, maybe this negative, yeah, because we don't have any integration, or the full integration of our economy to the global economy. But maybe this is blessing in disguise, that we can cushion the impact of the global impact of the pandemic, so we can rely on the domestic demand, so we can improve. How to improve domestic demand? Maybe some of the fiscal stimuli, one of the option. I think that's my response.
Okay, thank you, Professor Handri. We go to the second session of question and answer, and this is the question from Wahyudi Bahtiar. This is directed to Dr. Jayan. On your slide, Dr. Jayan, Indonesia is better than Asian countries, forecast 2020. But why in forecast 2021, Malaysia and Philippines are getting better? Then this is a question from Yuryadi Ilmi from Badan Pusat Statistik Kabupaten Balangan. The question is, it is a huge relief that our country economic growth doesn't contract it too deep. But why the poverty rate is surge? Latest poverty survey held in March when COVID just started. Okay, and the last one, the question is from HM Fahmi Amruzi from UIN Antasari Banjarmasin to Professor Handri. What is your opinion about budget refocusing policy from Kaminski perspective? And what is the effective way to control the realization for free from manipulation?
Okay, shall I start again?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, okay. So I think the question is why doesn't, while Indonesia doesn't drop as much as other countries, according to the forecasters, why doesn't it grow more sharply in 2021? I think it's simply because, the countries that are most negatively affected are the ones that are most reliant on trade and investment, more reliant than Indonesia. And so because the same factors that are pushing them down will also help them grow faster when they recover, right? So if you don't have that far to fall, you don't have that much to catch up in the case of Indonesia. But for the other countries, they will have, because they are being more negatively affected this year, they will also be more positively catching up when they actually, when we get over this pandemic and get on top of this virus. But again, I think one general point to make about all of these forecasts and all of these numbers, you can see there's so much variation, right? So I wouldn't look too closely at all the numbers. I think the more important thing is to understand the transmission mechanisms that produce those numbers, because there's so many different forecasts out there, and by different groups, and even these forecasts are changing over time, right? I showed you how the IMF had significantly revised their forecast and may again have to revise their forecast, maybe more than once before the year comes to an end, right? Because this shock is not a one-off shock, it's an evolving shock, right? And evolving in unpredictable ways. So if you cannot predict the shock, how can you predict with certainty the effects of the shock? Very hard. So what's more important is understanding the transmission mechanisms, right? So we know that, the first impact comes through things like travel and tourism, right? Because the first thing that countries do is they close their international borders, right? So the travel, tourism industries and all the linked industries to travel and tourism are immediately and badly affected. Airlines around the world are struggling just to remain afloat with government support as well, right? Then we have the second round effects that feed through the economy, right? And they operate through trade, exports of goods and services, and also people movement, right? Remittances. Indonesia has a large number of foreign overseas workers, like the Philippines, and there's been a very sharp drop in remittances. And this has social implications. In Philippines, one foreign overseas worker can support several, an extended family back in the province, and I'm sure it's the same in Indonesia. Now that lifeline has been lost in many cases as workers are retrenched from overseas and sent home, right? And sent home where employment prospects are even worse than when they left. They left because employment prospects were not good. Now they are forced to come back when things are even worse than when they left. So, these are conditions, I think, that the second round effects that we are already beginning to feel. And then finally, there's the general negative sentiment, right? The so-called intangible effects. The overall uncertainty is limiting investment, especially investment in infrastructure, long-term investments, the kinds of things that we need, to keep growth going and to improve productivity. All these things are being put on hold as long as the virus is uncertain and the outcomes are uncertain. So I would say let's focus on the transmission mechanisms more than just the numbers. Numbers are important, they're useful, we need them, but we need to understand where they come from. And to do that, the transmission mechanisms are critical. Let me stop there, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Jayan. Please, Professor Henry.
Okay, thank you. There's a question about the budget refocusing. I think that's it's very important because spending is very limited because the government has to issue high numbers of bonds, so they have to spend using a very clear objective. For example, government has to spend for example, like social transfer, social aid. I mean that especially for the poor, because the poor needs a lot of transfer from the government. That's at least they can live for at the subsistence level. That's one thing. Another thing is focusing on the small medium enterprise that they have to survive. Otherwise, they cannot survive at all because most of the income is from their business, small business. So that's for the business sector and also for the poor sector. Another thing that's for the revolving revolving the business to keep running of the business, they have to have some aid from the government. So something like subsidy for the working capital and other things like that, so they can keep surviving and keep doing business in that sense. Another thing that's for the investment. That's very important because government has focused for the investment in infrastructures as well, because after the COVID-19, the business keep running and maybe with the high acceleration. That's why important thing that's the investment should focus on the give big impact, something like that. That's for example, if sectors that absorb many employment, something like that, because that's very important. And how to avoid manipulation, that's a big problem because in the speed of action, we have to sometimes we have very careless about the procedure, and this is I mean the loophole for fraud. Yeah, that's community and procedure also should be obeyed. That's my answer, Pak Budaya.
Okay, thank you, Professor Henry. We are approaching to the end of this final session. So I don't want to, I don't have any intention to draw a conclusion of this international webinar, but I just want to highlight some key points our today's webinar. The first is we need to positive attitude and optimism to tackle down this pandemic. Secondly, Indonesia needs to balance between economic activities and effort to stop the spreading of the COVID-19. And the third is small middle enterprise should be supported by the government by giving them financial stimuli so that can increase the domestic demand. So thank you very much. We give applause to both distinguished speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Pak Dayan.
Pak Dayan dan Prof.
Terima
Andri.
kasih.
And
Terima kasih Pak Udaya.
Terima kasih Pak Dayan.
Andri, good to see you all.
I hand over this webinar to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for all the amazing economics and business and all participants. This could give us an insight to overcome challenge caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Please keep up your spirit and let's hand in hand build a better plan for the better future. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our event today. You may leave the meeting and please wait for further information of presentation materials and certificates in the WhatsApp group. To receive the certificate, you will have to fill the evaluation form. You can access the link of evaluation form in the Google Meet and YouTube chat rooms. Thank you so much and see you in another event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, hush, my dear, it's been a difficult years, and the terrorists don't prey on innocent victims. Trust me, darling, trust me, darling. It's been a loveless year. Oh, hush, my dear, it's been a difficult years, and the terrorists don't pray.
Selamat datang di Fakultas Ekonomi yang semula bernama Fakultas Ekonomi. Merupakan salah satu dari pada tahun 1958. Sampai pada tahun 2014, Fakultas Ekonomi merubah namanya menjadi Fakultas Ekonomi dan
Oh, hush, my dear. my dear, it's been a difficult years, and terrorists don't prey on innocent victims. Trust me, darling. Trust me, darling. It's been a loveless year. I'm a man of three fears: integrity, faith, and crocodile steel. when the world